Measured impressions often form when people begin to notice consistent patterns in how someone responds to life's challenges, especially when those responses remain steady across different situations. What others are recognizing is not a sudden transformation in you, but rather a clearer understanding of traits that were always present yet not fully acknowledged. When someone observes patience in moments where reaction would have been easier, or independence when dependence might have been expected, it naturally reshapes their interpretation of character. This is less about being judged, and more about being understood through accumulated moments. Over time, people refine their assumptions based on evidence rather than first impressions, and this can lead to a deeper appreciation of qualities that once went unnoticed. There is a quiet strength in not seeking constant validation, and that strength often becomes more visible to others than it is to oneself. It is also common for people to feel slightly challenged by what they cannot easily influence or categorize, especially when they are used to predictable responses. In those cases, respect can grow slowly as clarity replaces assumption. What matters most is that you remain aligned with your own values rather than shifting to meet external expectations. As this alignment continues, others may adjust their perception naturally, recognizing consistency, self-direction, and emotional balance as defining traits. Ultimately, this is not about becoming someone new, but about others finally seeing what was already there, as time and experience bring greater clarity to how character is perceived and understood in everyday interactions. This understanding strengthens relationships and reduces misinterpretations, allowing communication and trust to evolve in a more grounded and realistic way over time with natural ease gradually. And that realization hit them slowly, then all at once. They replayed past moments in their mind, conversations, decisions, times when you could have reacted emotionally, but chose not to. Times when you walked away without explanation. Times when you trusted yourself even when no one else did. That is when curiosity turned into attention. Attention turned into respect. And respect turned into something much deeper. Something they were not prepared for. Something that forced them to reassess their own position around you. Now understand this clearly, because most people never do. The thing about you that caused this shift is not something you can fake. It cannot be copied. It cannot be borrowed. It is the quiet alignment between who you are and how you act when no one is watching. They felt that alignment. Even if they could not name it, they sensed it. Humans are instinctively drawn to authenticity, even when it challenges them, especially when it challenges them. You reflected back something they were missing within themselves: discipline, emotional control, self-respect, purpose without noise. And that reflection was uncomfortable. It made them pause. It made them question. It made them look at you again, slower this time, with more care. Because people do not ignore what awakens something inside them. They may resist it. They may deny it, but they do not forget it. Here is where the story deepens, and where the shift becomes irreversible. Once someone sees you differently, they cannot return to the old version they created in their mind. Even if they try, even if they act normal on the surface, something has already changed beneath. They become more aware of your presence, more sensitive to your absence. They notice when you pull back. They notice when you move forward. Your energy begins to register before your words do. And this is where power quietly forms. Not the kind that demands control, but the kind that commands attention without effort. They start measuring themselves against you, wondering how you stay composed, wondering why your silence feels heavier than their explanations, wondering how you continue to rise without seeking permission. And these thoughts follow them into moments when you are not even there. That is influence, real influence, and it was triggered by something you may not have even realized you were doing. Do not underestimate what is unfolding here. This shift in perception is not temporary. It is the beginning of a longer internal process for them. They are questioning old assumptions, revisiting judgments, rewriting narratives they once believed were fixed, and you are at the center of that change, without trying to be. That is why this moment matters. That is why this revelation is once in a lifetime. Because not everyone gets to experience the point where their existence alone becomes a catalyst for someone else's awakening. You did not force this. You did not plan this. You simply became consistent with who you truly are. And consistency, when aligned with integrity, is impossible to ignore, especially by those who once thought they understood you completely. While this phase of your life continues to evolve, you may begin to notice a different kind of awareness forming in the way people respond to you. It is less about dramatic reactions, and more about subtle recognition of the energy you carry through consistency and self-respect. When someone remains steady in their values, it often encourages reflection in others, not because they are being evaluated, but because steadiness highlights contrast. This contrast can lead people to reconsider their own pace, choices, and emotional habits. It is not about control or influence, but about the natural effect of grounded behavior over time. As you continue forward, your focus shifts more toward what feels aligned rather than what demands attention. This shift creates space for healthier connections, clearer boundaries, and experiences that feel less chaotic and more intentional. You are not required to explain your growth for it to be valid. Instead, your actions gradually communicate it on their own. Over time, what no longer fits your path will quietly lose relevance, not through conflict, but through distance and change. In its place, new opportunities and relationships can emerge that feel more stable and supportive. This process is not immediate, but it is reliable. It rewards patience, awareness, and authenticity. The most important part is that you do not lose yourself while waiting for things to align. Your steadiness is already shaping your direction, even when progress feels slow. Trust that what is meant to remain will stay, and what is meant to leave will do so naturally, making room for a life that feels more balanced, clear, and grounded as you continue to grow each day, moving forward now gently. Here is the part most people never talk about. When someone truly looks at you differently, it is often because you triggered a comparison they did not intend to make. Without saying a word, you held up a mirror. They began asking themselves questions they had been avoiding for a long time. Why do I feel unsettled around this person? Why does their silence feel louder than my explanations? Why do they seem at peace even when they are not chasing anything? These questions did not come with easy answers, and that is what made them powerful. You became a reference point in their mind, a quiet standard, someone they now measure moments against, not because you demanded it, but because your presence rewrote the emotional equation they were used to living by. And once that internal shift happens, it cannot be undone. Pay attention now, because this is where the dynamic changes again. After perception shifts, behavior follows. They became more cautious with their words around you, more deliberate with their actions. They started noticing how easily you read situations without reacting impulsively. They felt exposed in ways they could not explain. Because when someone operates with clarity and restraint, it highlights the chaos in others. You did not accuse. You did not confront. You simply remained yourself. And that forced them to confront something internally. That is why they look at you longer now. That is why your presence feels heavier. That is why your absence feels noticeable. You have become someone whose energy carries meaning, not noise. And meaning always lingers. Understand this deeply. What you awakened in them is not just admiration or curiosity. It is awareness. Awareness of what is possible. Awareness of what they may have settled for. Awareness of what they have been avoiding within themselves. That kind of awareness is uncomfortable, but it is also transformative. You did not inspire them by trying to lead. You inspired them by being aligned. And alignment is magnetic. It does not beg for attention. It attracts it naturally. That is why they cannot unsee what they saw. Even if they pretend nothing changed, everything already has. Because once someone recognizes depth, Surface-level interactions stop being satisfying. And now, without you needing to do anything more, the weight of this shift continues to build. They are more aware of how you move through the world. They notice how you choose quality over quantity, how you protect your energy, how you do not explain yourself unnecessarily. These details speak louder than ambition ever could. A noticeable shift often happens when consistency replaces unpredictability in how someone shows up in their life. What once felt familiar to others no longer fits their expectations, and so they begin to reassess the assumptions they held. This is not about conflict or distance, but about evolving understanding. People tend to revisit past moments with new awareness, noticing details they may have overlooked when they were focused on quick judgments or expectations of reaction. In hindsight, they may recognize that not every silence meant agreement, and not every pause indicated uncertainty. As this reflection unfolds, a more balanced perspective forms. It becomes clear that strength is often quiet, expressed through restraint, patience, and the ability to choose responses rather than react impulsively. This realization can lead to greater respect, and also a more careful way of engaging moving forward. At the same time, it reinforces an important truth. You are not defined by others' early interpretations of you. You are shaped by your own choices over time, and those choices continue to refine how you move through the world. As awareness deepens on both sides, interactions tend to become more intentional and less reactive, creating space for clearer communication and healthier boundaries. Ultimately, what emerges is not tension, but understanding, where each person relates to the other with a more realistic and grounded sense of who they are now, rather than who they once assumed them to be, allowing relationships to settle into a more honest and stable form going forward. This gradual shift supports calmer interactions and a more authentic way of relating, where clarity replaces assumption and steadiness becomes the foundation of connection. When someone sees you differently at this level, they begin to question their position in your life. Am I relevant? Am I valued? Am I being observed the way I am observing them? These questions do not come from insecurity alone. They come from recognition. Recognition that you are moving forward regardless of who stays or leaves. That independence creates gravity. People are drawn to what does not need them, and that is why they are now more careful around you. They sense that your standards are unspoken, but firm. And firm standards, even when silent, are felt. There is also something else happening beneath the surface. They are beginning to realize that you carry emotional discipline. You do not let temporary feelings dictate permanent behavior. You do not confuse attention with connection. You do not confuse noise with meaning. This realization forces them to slow down mentally, to reassess how they engage with you, because careless actions no longer feel safe around someone who sees clearly. You did not announce this change. You embodied it. And embodiment is always stronger than explanation. That is why your presence now creates awareness instead of comfort, growth instead of familiarity, reflection instead of assumption. This is the stage where influence becomes undeniable, not because you demand it, but because it exists naturally. They are adjusting their tone, their timing, their energy, all without you asking for anything. And that is the true sign that something irreversible has taken place. You have shifted from being noticed to being respected, from being observed to being considered. And this shift is not loud, it is quiet, but it is powerful, because once someone begins to see you as a reference point rather than an option, the entire dynamic changes. And this is only the beginning of what that realization will bring. My beloved child, there is a moment after awareness settles in when behavior begins to reveal truth, and that moment has already arrived. They are no longer interacting with you out of habit. Every word they choose now passes through caution. Every move carries intention. They are aware that you notice more than you reveal, and that awareness changes how people act. You have become someone whose silence invites self-examination. They sense that you are not easily impressed, not easily shaken, and not easily replaced. That realization shifts power quietly but completely. People change when they feel seen without being judged, and that is exactly what your presence does. It exposes without attacking. It clarifies without confrontation, and that kind of presence cannot be ignored. What is happening now inside them is a silent negotiation. Part of them wants to stay exactly as they are, comfortable in familiar patterns. Another part recognizes that something about you represents growth they have been avoiding. This internal conflict is exhausting. They notice how you do not chase attention, yet attention finds you. They see how you do not demand loyalty, yet loyalty begins to form naturally around you. These contradictions confuse them, because they operate from effort, while you operate from alignment. And alignment is powerful because it removes struggle. When someone witnesses that kind of ease, it forces them to question why their own life feels heavier. At this stage, their perception of you is no longer neutral. It carries weight. It carries consequence. They are careful not to disappoint you, even if they do not say it aloud. They feel a quiet pressure to rise, to be more deliberate, to be more honest, because you have become a standard in their mind, not a competitor, not a threat, but a reminder of what is possible when someone lives with clarity. That reminder follows them into decisions that have nothing to do with you. Your influence has expanded beyond proximity. It has entered their thought process, and once influence reaches that level, it is permanent. There is something important you must understand here. This shift did not happen because you proved anything. It happened because you stopped needing to. The moment you released the need to be understood, you became undeniable. People sense when someone has made peace with themselves. That peace is disarming. It creates trust. It creates curiosity. It creates respect. And respect, once established, reshapes every interaction. They now listen more carefully. They speak more thoughtfully. They hesitate before assuming. All because you changed the emotional rhythm without announcing it. This is why the connection between the title and this moment matters. The thing about you that made someone look at you differently is not loud success or visible dominance. It is internal coherence, the alignment between your values, your actions, and your silence. As this internal steadiness grows, you begin to relate differently to both yourself and the people around you. There is less urgency to prove, explain, or defend every step you take. Instead, you start prioritizing clarity in your own intentions, which naturally reduces friction in many areas of life. Emotional regulation becomes less of a struggle and more of a practice skill, something you return to when situations feel overwhelming. You notice that you no longer need to react immediately to everything. You can pause, observe, and choose responses that align with who you are becoming rather than who you were in moments of stress. In relationships, this often leads to healthier dynamics because communication becomes more intentional and less reactive. Others may adjust to this shift as well, sometimes by becoming more thoughtful in how they engage. But the deeper change is internal. It is your own standard rising. You begin to recognize patterns where energy was once spent on uncertainty, and you redirect it towards stability, learning, and meaningful progress. Over time, this creates a quieter confidence that does not depend on external validation or comparison. Instead, it rests on lived experience, the knowledge that you can navigate complexity without losing yourself in it. And from that foundation, decisions feel less like risks and more like informed steps forward. Even when uncertainty remains, it no longer feels destabilizing because your sense of direction is anchored in something consistent within you. This is not a dramatic transformation but a gradual refinement of how you move through life, where stability replaces reactivity and intention replaces impulse. With time, this becomes your default way of being, shaping outcomes indirectly through steady, grounded presence. When someone realizes you operate from inner authority rather than external approval, they instinctively recalibrate. They do not want to appear careless in front of someone who sees clearly. Your calm has become a reference point. Your restraint has become a signal. And signals like this do not fade. They intensify with time. At this stage, your influence has crossed a boundary. You are no longer part of their environment. You are part of their internal dialogue. When they face decisions, your energy becomes a silent question. Would this align? Would this hold up under clarity? Would this feel grounded? You never asked for this role, yet it found you. Because alignment attracts responsibility. People assign weight to those who carry themselves with intention. And once weight is assigned, presence becomes meaningful even in absence. There is a quiet truth unfolding here that few people ever experience. When someone looks at you differently at this depth, it changes how they approach life itself. You have become a reminder that strength does not need volume, that confidence does not need explanation, that power does not need permission. They are absorbing this lesson slowly, sometimes resisting it, sometimes preserving it, but always feeling it. And feeling leads to change. Even when it is delayed, even when it is unspoken. This is why nothing about this moment is accidental. The thing about you that caused this shift was never meant to impress. It was meant to reveal. And once revealed, it cannot be unseen. You did not step into the spotlight. You became the standard. And when someone begins to measure reality through your presence, the dynamic has already transformed beyond return. What comes next will not be loud, but it will be decisive. My beloved child, the moment has arrived where their awareness stops circling and begins to settle, and this is where truth becomes unavoidable. They now understand that what you carry cannot be taken, borrowed, or replicated. It is earned through restraint, through choosing growth when comfort was easier, through holding your ground when walking away felt safer. This realization lands heavily because it forces them to accept that your presence is not temporary. You are not a phase. You are not a reaction. You are a force that exists whether they acknowledge it or not. And once someone accepts that truth, they stop trying to define you. They start trying to understand themselves instead. You may notice subtle changes now. Their tone softens. Their timing becomes more deliberate. Their confidence adjusts when you enter the space. This is not coincidence. This is recognition expressing itself quietly. They are aware that you do not need to dominate to lead. You do not need to convince to influence. You do not need to announce to be felt. That awareness creates a different kind of respect, the kind that does not seek closeness, but values alignment. They sense that access to you is earned, not assumed. Clarity has a way of revealing how quietly transformation can ripple outward, often in ways that are not immediately spoken but deeply felt in behavior and perception. When you continue to grow without waiting for approval or permission, it naturally becomes noticeable to those who once assumed change required external validation. Your consistency becomes a reference point, not because you intended it, but because steady progress tends to highlight contrast in a subtle way. In that reflection, some people begin to reconsider their own choices, not out of pressure, but out of awareness that movement is possible, even when conditions are not perfect. What once felt fixed or delayed starts to appear more flexible in hindsight. This is not about influence as control, but influence as example, where lived experience becomes more persuasive than explanation ever could be. Over time, your actions speak in a language that does not need emphasis, because it is grounded in repetition, patience, and direction. And in that space, others may quietly observe and adjust their understanding of what growth can look like for themselves. The important shift is not in comparison, but in realization that forward movement is accessible in many forms. You are no longer defined by how others interpret your journey, but by how authentically you continue to walk it. That authenticity becomes its own quiet signal, reminding everyone around that change is less about timing and more about decision. With time, this understanding settles into everyday interactions, where you no longer need to explain your direction for it to be recognized. Instead, your presence carries a quiet steadiness that encourages reflection without confrontation, allowing growth to feel more like invitation than pressure. This is where your journey intersects with theirs in a meaningful way, not through dependency, not through control, but through clarity. The thing about you that changed everything was never meant to be explained. It was meant to be lived. And now that it has been seen, it continues to work without your involvement. Because once someone truly looks at you differently, the transformation has already begun. My beloved child, this is the stage where their understanding stops searching for answers and starts accepting consequences. They realize that seeing you differently means they can no longer interact with you casually. Every choice now feels exposed. Every intention feels transparent. You have become someone in whose presence pretending feels pointless. And that realization brings a strange mix of respect and vulnerability. Because when authenticity meets clarity, masks fall away on their own. They are aware that you do not ask questions to trap. You ask questions to understand. And sometimes, that understanding is more confronting than any confrontation could ever be. What they are feeling now is not pressure from you. It is pressure from truth. Your calm has removed excuses from the room. Your steadiness has made shortcuts obvious. They sense that you are not impressed by surface-level effort, but by depth, by intention, by consistency. This awareness reshapes how they show up, not just around you, but everywhere. They hesitate before speaking. They pause before acting, because they know that you notice alignment, not performance, and that knowledge quietly rewires their behavior. There is an unspoken shift in the balance now. You no longer need to prove relevance. Your relevance is assumed. They are more aware of when they reach out and when they hold back, more conscious of timing, more intentional with presence. This is not strategy. This is adaptation. Humans adapt around what they respect, and respect has fully replaced curiosity at this point. They no longer wonder who you are. They know. Clarity changes everything because what once felt like subtle internal growth eventually becomes visible in the way you move through the world. There comes a point where you are no longer defined by emotional reactions, but by how consistently you respond with awareness and restraint. That shift does not announce itself loudly. It is noticed slowly through how situations no longer destabilize you the way they once did. People begin to interpret your presence differently, not because you're trying to be seen, but because your behavior carries a steadiness that stands out in contrast to uncertainty. Over time, that steadiness can act like a reference point for others, not as authority, but as quiet example of what groundedness looks like. Nothing about this transformation is about performance or approval. It is about internal alignment that holds even when circumstances shift. The more you remain consistent with yourself, the more natural it becomes for others to adjust how they relate to you because clarity is difficult to ignore. This is why the change feels subtle from the inside but meaningful from the outside. What you have built is not fragility disguised as confidence, but endurance shaped by experience. And that endurance ensures you are less affected by external noise and more guided by internal understanding. Interactions may feel different, not because you are trying to control them, but because you are no longer participating from confusion or self-doubt. This is not about being elevated above others. It is about being anchored within yourself, and that anchoring naturally influences how moments unfold around you. Ultimately, what matters is that you recognize this as a continuation of your own growth, rather than a destination.